or he tries to propose in his Compromise of 1850, we first have to get some of the major players who are involved here and what their thoughts are on the Mexican cession. So the first one is going to be our president at the time. So Zachary Taylor, you should remember him from the Mexican-American War. He's a major general, nicknamed Old Rough and Ready. And so he's winning all types of battles in the Mexican War. And Polk, nervous about him being a political competitor, fires him and hires Winfield Scott in his place. But he's rightfully should be nervous about Zachary Taylor because eventually he wins the election of 1848 for the Whig Party. Now, Taylor's kind of an anomaly here because you would expect him, you would expect him as a Southerner to not be, to want to extend this line of slavery, but he's also a Whig. So foremost in his mind is expansion. Expansion and keeping the country together. So really what Zachary Taylor, his contribution here is he believes in allowing a new concept, something called popular sovereignty to govern the Mexican cession. And really what this means is that he wants to let the people decide by a popular vote. So each new territory that wants to become a state, they get to have popular sovereignty. The people in the state get to vote and they choose whatever they want. And Taylor really knows that California, New Mexico, most of these states are going to vote to be free states. And so this kind of is going to change the landscape, the political landscape here. Now he's going to he's going to kind of employ the help of a senator from New York named William H. Seward to kind of help push his idea of popular sovereignty in the Mexican cession here. Now, Southerners, of course, are against this because they feel like this is an attack on their power. They're worried about balance of power here. California comes into the Union, it's going to throw off the balance of power. California wants to come in as a free state. And this is really going to throw power into the North and leave the South as a minority in the country without really much say or really much pull. So this is his proposal as the president. He's going to try and let William H. Seward push this idea. Now, Henry Clay, he wants to keep the country together. He can foresee California and this issue here in the Compromise of 1850 completely pulling the country apart. And so what he's going to try and do is try and appease everyone. He's known for his great compromises. If you remember, obviously the Missouri Compromise of 1820, he also is instrumental in creating a compromise with the nullification crisis between Calhoun and Jackson. He has that reputation. So Clay, he's old at this point. He's in his 70s. But he's going to kind of come one last time onto the national stage to try and make this compromise here for the country. Now, so let's take a step inside of Henry Clay's brain and see what exactly is he thinking. What does he want to do here with California? So if we take a look inside his head, he's thinking of a few things here, Henry Clay. Number one, he wants to allow California to come into the Union as a free state because he knows that the people in California want to be a free state anyway. And so that is kind of almost like a given. The second part of his plan here is down here, popular sovereignty. So again, he kind of adapts Taylor's idea and he says, let's let the other states choose. At any other territory that comes in, let them choose popular sovereignty. They can choose what they want to be. The last thing, though, that he puts in is he puts in this law known as the Fugitive Slave Law. And the Fugitive Slave Law, this is really his way of appeasing the South. And so he puts this in, and what the Fugitive Slave Law, it kind of strengthens the Southerners' hold on slaves as property. So it really reinforces the fact that they can own slaves, it's protected by the Constitution, and the second thing here about the Fugitive Slave Law is that they can go into Northern Territory, into places where slavery is banned, and they could bring back their slaves. So any slave that runs away is never really safe in the North, according to the Fugitive Slave Law. The Southerners can kind of send out slave catchers, which they often did, to kind of bring back slaves into these slave states. So this is the basics of Henry Clay's compromise here between the North and the South. Now, this doesn't mean that it gets passed right away. What it means is that it's going to go into Congress, and they're, of course, going to debate about it. So the three great statesmen of the day, you have Daniel Webster from Massachusetts, John Calhoun, and you have Henry Clay. Now, all of them are virtually on their deathbed at the time. You know, Calhoun, he's in his 70s. Daniel Webster is in his 70s. Calhoun is so sick that he cannot even read his speech. He just comes back to Congress just to kind of implore one last time his position. So they both give really impassioned speeches here. And what Calhoun is going to say, again, we know he's kind of the champion of states' rights here. And so Calhoun is going to kind of go out there and against the Compromise of 1850 and say that it's going to relegate the South to minority status in the Union because really the only states that can come in are going to be free states. All of Mexico is going to come in as Mexican cession is going to come in as free states. All of the Louisiana Territory, for the most part, is going to come in as free states. And so he's trying to propose that the South should gain an extra power where they will be able to veto anything that goes against slavery. So he makes this impassioned speech basically against the compromise here. Now, Daniel Webster, an ardent anti-slavery leader from the North, from Massachusetts, is going to get up and make a surprising speech because in the North, the Fugitive Slave Law, even though it's not a law yet, they are just completely against it. They look at it as kind of making the Northerners comply with slavery and comply with this institution that they disagree with so much. And he surprises everybody by making a speech basically saying, listen, we have to pass the Compromise of 1850 because he sees it as the patriotic duty to keep the Union together, to keep the country together. And so he goes out there and he makes this very famous speech. And he says we have to just swallow the Fugitive Slave Law. It's for the best for the nation. Now, in the end, at this time, it does not pass. And Zachary Taylor, he made it very clear that he would not sign any compromise. And he looks at the Fugitive Slave Law as a compromise. And he is not going to kind of put that into law. So two things kind of happen here in conjunction. Another important senator kind of comes onto to the national stage. So his name is Stephen Douglas, and he is a senator from Illinois. And he basically realizes that together with all of the points that Clay made up, all the 4 points that he made up, it's not going to pass together. There's no way it's going to get through. But he thought if we break it up and we try and let people vote on each thing individually, if we vote on the Fugitive Slave Law individually, if we vote on California coming into the Union as a free state individually, then maybe we can get the compromise through. And he's right. By doing that, they're able to kind of get the compromise passed. Now, fate kind of takes a step in the direction of getting the compromise passed also. In the meantime, Zachary Taylor, he's going to die. And basically he died from the heat in Washington, from pretty much like a heat exhaustion in Washington. And they said that he was either drinking lemonade or drinking cherries and eating cherries and drinking milk, and it kind of made the situation worse. And so who's going to step in here is his vice president, Millard Fillmore. And his vice president made it very clear that he would sign off on a compromise. And so because of this, the Compromise of 1850 does go into effect. So once again, the great compromiser, Henry Clay, is able to kind of make one last compromise for the country he fought for and represented for his entire life. Now, what this does, though, is it really creates a compromise that satisfies neither side. The North increasingly starts to get more and more upset about the Fugitive Slave Law because it endangers not only Northern rights here, but free black communities are going to be extremely upset because slave owners are going to try and go after slaves that escaped years and years ago before the Fugitive Slave Law was passed. So it kind of makes anybody who's black in the North a target for these slave catchers. The South is not satisfied either because it does regulate them to minority status for the rest of their existence. all this territory out here is, for the most part, going to become free states. It is not the right type of climate for cotton production, and slavery does not make sense out here in these western territories. And so it really doesn't offer them what they want. And specifically where slavery is the most prolific in the lower South, well, their slaves, for the most part, are not escaping all the way up to the north. And so that really only affects the border states here, like Virginia and Kentucky and maybe Tennessee and Missouri a little bit. So it doesn't even appease the big slave-holding states of the lower South here. And so really the Compromise of 1850, although it again puts a Band-Aid on a problem that is much, much bigger than this. And it really just creates more controversy here in the United States. And so sectionalism is really dividing the country at the time. And that's really what we're going to pick up tomorrow, kind of the increasing sectionalism in